Good afternoon, everyone. Real talk before we start. Physical proximity changes things. When someone moves from digital distance to actual presence, when they cross the boundary from thought to action, that means something. And you need to be clear about what it means before it happens. Let's break this down. Pay attention, close attention, because there's something developing in someone's mind that's moving from idea into plan, from possibility into probable action, from maybe I should into I'm going to. And that something, it 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 involves showing up in your physical space, your actual location, your home, not metaphorically, not energetically, literally. Someone is contemplating, planning, or actively moving toward appearing at your door, at your place, in your actual three-dimensional reality, instead of just occupying mental or digital space. Stay grounded, because this isn't about creating paranoia. This isn't about making you feel unsafe or violated or like your privacy is being threatened. This is about giving you awareness, about letting you know that someone's internal process has reached a point where they're considering taking physical action, where the distance they've been maintaining is becoming uncomfortable enough that they're willing to cross it, and you need to be prepared for that possibility. Need to have thought through how you'd respond. Need to be clear about your boundaries before they're tested. Can you feel this building? Do you already sense someone's energy moving closer? Drop a comment if you know who this might be, because here's what I'm picking up on in the energy around this situation. This person has been wrestling internally, debating, going back and forth about whether to make direct physical contact with you. They've been stuck in their head about it, imagining scenarios, rehearsing what they'd say, trying to predict how you'd react. And for a while, that internal processing was enough to satisfy the urge, the fantasy of showing up, the mental rehearsal of the conversation. It kept the actual action at bay. But something shifted. The internal processing isn't satisfying anymore. The distance isn't comfortable anymore. The not knowing is becoming unbearable. And they're moving toward resolution, toward closure, toward some form of direct confrontation or connection that requires physical presence, not necessarily with malicious intent, not necessarily to create drama or chaos or harm, but definitely with urgency, with need, with the kind of internal pressure that overrides social norms about respecting space and appropriate boundaries. Does this match energy you've been picking up? Let me know in the comments. Because let me get specific about who this might be and why they're considering this action. For some of you, this is an ex, someone you had significant connection with who's been processing the end, processing their regret, processing what they lost. And they've reached a point where digital communication doesn't feel adequate, where a text or call or message doesn't capture what they need to express. They want to see your face. They want to read your body language. They want to be in the same physical space because they believe that proximity will create the conditions for the conversation they're imagining. Maybe they want to apologize in person. Maybe they want to ask for another chance. Maybe they just want to see you to confirm you're real, to bridge the gap that distance has created. For others of you, this is someone currently in your life who feels there's unfinished business. A friend, a family member, someone who's been feeling tension or distance in the dynamic, and they've decided that the issue needs to be addressed face to face, that whatever's been happening between you can't be resolved through text, that showing up is the only way to force the conversation they think needs to happen. Maybe they feel misunderstood. Maybe they feel wronged. Maybe they just want clarity and they're convinced that physical presence is how to get it. For others, still, this is someone who's been holding feelings they haven't expressed. Someone who's realized that time is passing, opportunity is slipping, and if they don't act soon, they might lose their chance entirely. And they're deciding that showing up unannounced is better than continuing to sit with unexpressed feelings. That the risk of rejection is preferable to the certainty of never knowing. Which scenario feels closest to your situation? Comment below and let me know. Because here's what you need to understand about why showing up physically feels necessary to this person. They've constructed a narrative in their mind about what will happen when they see you, about how the conversation will go, about what your reaction will be. And in that narrative, physical presence is the key variable. They believe that if they can just get in front of you, if they can just make eye contact, if they can just be in the same room, something will shift, something will soften, something will create the opening they're hoping for. They're banking on the awkwardness of face-to-face interaction to prevent you from maintaining boundaries you might maintain digitally. They're counting on physical proximity to create vulnerability that distance allows you to avoid. They might be right about that. Being physically present does change dynamics, does make certain responses harder, does create pressure that doesn't exist through a screen. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to engage just because they've decided to show up. That doesn't mean their need for this conversation overrides your right to control access to your space. Have you been sensing this kind of strategic thinking from someone? Let me know in the comments, because I want to talk about what's driving this urge to show up physically. Desperation, often. Not necessarily romantic desperation, but the desperation of needing resolution, of not being able to sit with uncertainty anymore, of requiring some kind of closure, even if it's uncomfortable. Control, sometimes the need to force an interaction on their terms, in their timing, the discomfort with you having agency over whether and how communication happens, genuine care, occasionally, real desire to repair, to connect, to address something that matters, not manipulative intent, but clumsy execution of genuine feeling, impulsivity, frequently, not thinking through the implications, not considering your perspective, just acting on the urge without filtering it through appropriate social boundaries. The motivation matters because it tells you something about how to receive this if it happens, about whether this is someone whose presence you might want to allow or someone whose boundary crossing is a red flag. But regardless of motivation, you get to decide. You get to set terms. You get to determine whether your space is accessible to this person or not. Does that feel clear? Do you know you have that right? Drop a comment if you're claiming that authority, because here's what I need you to hear about preparing for this possibility. First, you need to get clear with yourself about whether you want to see this person, not whether you should, not whether it would be kind or mature or growth oriented to engage, but whether you actually want to. Because if you don't want to, if seeing them doesn't serve you, if engaging with whatever they want to discuss isn't something you have capacity for right now, you don't have to open the door. You don't have to have the conversation. You don't have to make yourself available just because they've decided to show up. Their decision to appear at your space doesn't create obligation on your part. Their need for resolution doesn't override your need for boundaries. You can simply not answer. You can acknowledge they're there, but decline to engage. You can set a firm boundary that this isn't how communication happens with you. And if you do want to see them, if you are open to the conversation, if there's part of you that's curious or willing or ready, you still get to set conditions, time limits, clear expectations about what you will and won't discuss. Boundaries about behavior you'll tolerate, your space, your terms, always. Have you been clear with yourself about what you want? Let me know in the comments, because I also want to address the why behind their potential showing up. What do they actually want from this interaction? What are they hoping to accomplish? For some, it's reconciliation. They want you back in some capacity. They want to repair what was broken. They want access to you that they've lost. For others, it's validation. They want you to acknowledge their perspective. They want you to see things from their angle. They want confirmation that they weren't entirely wrong or bad or at fault. For others still, it's relief. They want to discharge the feelings they've been carrying. They want to say what they need to say, regardless of how you receive it. They want to feel like they tried, like they did their part, like they can move forward knowing they made the attempt. And sometimes it's disruption. Conscious or unconscious desire to destabilize whatever peace you've built without them, to remind you of their existence, to insert themselves back into your awareness, whether you want them there or not. Knowing what they want helps you assess whether engaging serves you, whether what they're seeking is something you're willing to provide, whether this interaction has potential to be constructive, or whether it's just going to reopen wounds. Can you sense what this person is actually after? Comment below if you have clarity on their motivation, because here's what happens if they do show up and you choose to engage. The conversation probably won't go how they've imagined it. Reality rarely matches the scripts we write in our heads. They've been rehearsing, they've been planning what to say, they've been anticipating your responses and preparing their counters, but you're a real person with agency, not a character in their mental narrative. You're going to respond from your actual state, not their imagined version of you. And that mismatch, it's going to create friction, awkwardness, moments where the conversation doesn't flow the way they expected. And in those moments, you're going to see who they really are, whether they can adapt when things don't go according to plan, whether they can respect your reality when it conflicts with their expectations, whether they're actually present with you or just performing the script they prepared. So if you engage, pay attention to how they handle the unexpected, how they respond when you don't react the way they anticipated, whether they can actually hear you or whether they're just waiting for their turn to deliver their prepared lines. That will tell you everything you need to know about whether this person has actually evolved or whether they're just desperate. Does this feel like useful guidance? Let me know in the comments, because I want to talk about the aftermath. Whether you engage or don't engage, whether you open the door or keep it closed, whether you have the conversation or decline it, there will be aftermath, there will be feelings, there will be processing to do. If you engage and it goes poorly, you might feel regret, might wish you'd protected your space more firmly, might be frustrated with yourself for giving someone another opportunity to disappoint you. If you engage and it goes well, you might feel confused. Might wonder if you made the right choice keeping distance before. Might question whether you should give this person another chance. If you don't engage, you might feel guilty. Might wonder if you were too harsh. Might second guess whether you should have at least heard them out. If you don't engage, you might feel empowered. Might recognize that honoring your boundaries feels better than accommodating someone else's agenda. Might be proud of yourself for protecting your peace. All of these responses are valid. All of them are part of navigating complex human relationships with people who matter or mattered to us. The key is making the choice consciously from your center, based on what actually serves you, not what you think you should do, because either way, there's going to be aftermath. You can't avoid having feelings about this situation, but you can control whether those feelings come from choices you made consciously or choices you made reactively. Have you been thinking about the aftermath? Drop a comment if this perspective helps, because here's what I really want you to take from this. Someone showing up at your physical space is a boundary test. It's them prioritizing their need over your autonomy. It's them deciding that their desire for this interaction outweighs social norms about respecting distance and seeking permission, and how you respond to that test, it sets precedent. It teaches them what's acceptable. It demonstrates whether your boundaries are real or whether they're flexible when tested. So whatever you choose, choose it consciously. Choose it knowing what it communicates. Choose it based on what you want to reinforce. If you want to signal that showing up unannounced is acceptable, that desperate measures get rewarded, that boundary crossing leads to engagement, then engage freely. If you want to signal that your space is sacred, that access requires invitation, that boundaries matter and will be enforced, then protect your space accordingly. Neither is wrong. They're just different choices with different implications. But make the choice yours. Make it conscious. Make it aligned with who you're becoming and what you're building. Not from guilt, not from obligation, not from old patterns of accommodating people who don't respect your autonomy, from clarity, from power, from knowing exactly what you're doing and why. Can you commit to that? Let me know in the comments. Because ultimately, this isn't just about whether someone shows up at your house. It's about how you navigate being in relationship with people who sometimes prioritize their needs over your boundaries. And that's a skill, a practice, a continuous choosing of yourself even when it's uncomfortable. So use this situation as practice. Use it as opportunity to demonstrate to yourself that you can honor your boundaries even when tested, that you can stay in your power even when someone's trying to pull you out of it, because that's the real work, not managing other people's behavior, but staying grounded in your own clarity regardless of what they do. And if you can do that, if you can stay centered, whether they show up or not, whether you engage or don't, then you're building something real, something sustainable, something that serves you long after this particular situation resolves. That's the goal. Not getting the interaction right, but staying true to yourself through it. And you can do that. You're ready for it. Whatever happens, you've got this. I don't sell futures, I build architects. No predictions, just the raw truth for the tough ones. Stop magic, stay in the now.